Hey money, how much house can I afford? Curled up into a fetal position. I know how you feel, money. I know how you feel. I'm sorry, that was a comment that wins the internet. That was the comment from Elysium, thank you. That's how that trick should have been presented in the first place. But anyway, today I wanted to talk about how much house we can afford to buy. I feel like as a YouTuber, if I could call myself that oddly enough, we make videos that are largely relevant to our lives about the things that we are currently experiencing the moment that we're going through them. And lately, for the past 6 months of my life, I have been seriously looking to buy a house. Mostly because my money is just basically burning a hole in my wallet. Yes, I did that again, but also because I want to invest in real estate, but I've never bought a house before, and there's a few questions that I need answered in this video, like, are house prices going to continue going up because of low inventory and low interest rate environment? Or should I borrow a ton of money because I know that money tomorrow will be worth a lot less than money today, so I'm shorting the dollar because of inflation? And should Californians really be moving out here? I'm just kidding. I don't have anything against Californians other than how they drive. It's like GTA in real life. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're feeling well, hope you're doing great, and I want to share something really interesting with you. In Soviet Russia, like button smash you. Just kidding. That's not what I was going to say. I don't know what that came from. In 2019, the median household income was reported to be the highest that it's ever been at $68,703. But according to house price data, in Q2 of 2020, the median household purchase price of a home was actually $313,200. That means that people are spending 4.5 times their annual salary on their home. And that means that it's about at the top of the affordability scale. And house prices have been increasing faster and faster. And there's two major reasons for this. Now, the first reason is because inventory is extremely low. Take a look at this graph that shows the housing inventory in the last 5 years. The last time it was this bad was in 2003. And even then, it wasn't quite this bad. And the second reason is because of the low interest rates. Take a look at this graph that shows interest rates in the last 50 years. It shows that interest rates are sliding lower and lower, and we're currently sitting at 2.8%. Now that means that more and more people can now afford to buy more and more house. So people are buying more and more house. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So today, more than ever, I think it's really important to talk about how much house people can actually afford. So I'll just share with you right away the actual traditional method that we're told to follow, and then I'll tell you the real method that people that are financial nerds like to use when watching these videos. You nerd. So the first method is to take your monthly income and multiply it by 0.28. So take me, for example. When I was earning $50,000 per year before YouTube, that converts to a monthly income of $4,167 a month. And if we multiply that by 0.28, we get $1,167 a month. So if my mortgage payment can fall within that range or lower, then that means I can technically afford the house, which is at roughly 5 times my salary or $250,000 for the home. But there's also one extra step. Now, if you want to increase your chances for getting a loan, you want to make sure that your DTI is 36% or less. Now, DTI, as the kids on Tinder like to say, is down to invest. Hey girl, you DTI? It means debt to income ratio. And what it is they will look at all your debts across the board, like your student loans, your auto loans, your credit card debts, outstanding gambling debts if you live here in Vegas. And they'll add all that up, including the mortgage payment, and they will divide that number by your monthly gross income, which is income that you earned before paying taxes. And if it's 36% or less, then there's a good chance they will approve you on the loan. But don't forget to include the most important costs as well. And that's those little monthly additional costs like HOAs, which here in Las Vegas are literally one of the most corrupt organizations you'll ever find. You'll also have to include your property taxes, which are typically 1% of the purchase price of the home, as well as your homeowner's insurance. And if you're actually buying a house, don't forget to include the closing costs, which are anywhere between 2 to 5% of the home purchase price, as well as maintenance costs, which are 1% of the purchase price per year, or $1 per square foot per year. Whichever method of those two that you use, it's gonna come out to be about the same. Super important to remember though, a lender's job is very similar to a minimum wage employer. If you ever worked one of those jobs, you'll know that it's basically a way for them to tell us, look, I would love to pay you less, except that would be illegal. So similarly, a lender or a banker's job is to give us as much debt and as much money as possible while making sure that it's just barely sustainable enough and safe enough for them to get a return on their investment for safety and regulatory reasons. So the method that I just described, the traditional one of finding out how much house you can afford, is gonna be a little different than the one you're about to hear right now. You're gonna think it's a little crazy, but I did this for cars, and in that video, I told people that they shouldn't spend on their car more than 1/10 of what they make per year. So if you make $100,000 per year, don't spend more than $10,000 on your car. And some people disagreed, but that's the path to fat fire, which is a way for you to have a really good retirement where you spend more than the average person at $100,000 per year. So these are the 3 rules that I'm following when trying to find a house right now. I'm probably gonna trigger my friend Kevin, but here we go. And the frugal way is this. It's following the 3-30-10 rule. And you have to follow all of these rules, and if you can't, follow at least one. Otherwise, you technically can't afford it and you shouldn't even be buying that house. Even if you can technically afford it, you're still increasing your risk, which is bad in times of uncertainty. So rule number 1 is the 3. Now what the 3 says is that you shouldn't be buying a house that is worth more than 3 times your annual income. So for example, if you're making $100,000 per year, you should not be buying a house that's more than $300,000. And I realize that this rule is extremely difficult to follow, especially if you live in very high cost of living areas like New York City or San Francisco. In some of those cases, it is literally impossible to buy a house that is 3 to 5 times your annual income. For example, the real median household income of people in New York was $71,855. Meanwhile, the median sales price was $632,271. That means the average family there was spending 9 times their annual income to buy a house. And that is after pandemic prices. When it was before the pandemic, it was in the mid-700s. That means after the mortgage insurance, the mortgage itself, and the property taxes, the monthly payment comes out to be roughly $3,000 a month. And that's after the 20% down payment, which avoids the PMI, which a lot of people would have a hard time coming up with. That means their debt to income ratio is 50% or more, and that's not even counting all the other potential debts that a person can have. So that means they are literally the definition of being house poor. So the moral of that story is just get out of New York City or any other expensive luxury coastal cities. I realize that if you love the ocean, it's not worth sacrificing your entire life and your savings. Just buy a house that's 3 times your annual income, pay it off, and if you love those cities, just travel there and go on vacation. Because otherwise it's a race to the bottom and it's not a race that you want to win. And rule number 2 is to have 30% of the entire home purchase price saved in cash. Now all this rule does is it lowers our payments as well as tempts us away from selling our home prematurely in case it drops in value. So 20% of that should go towards the down payment to get rid of the PMI, the private mortgage insurance, which is just a way for our lender of forcing us to buy into insurance so that we don't foreclose or default on our loans. But for all intents and purposes, it's literally throwing money away and we want to get rid of it. The other 10% should be saved for miscellaneous purposes like protecting ourselves against the Llorona of 2020. And here's a perfect example. Let's say you bought a house that's worth $300,000, you put down 20%, which means that your loan is now a grand total of $240,000. And let's say at the current market interest rate, which is 3%, your monthly payment should be around $1,100 to $1,200 per month. But because you have that 10% of cash, which is $30,000, that represents 25 months or roughly 2 years of payments that you could cover in case the worst was to happen and you lost your job or you got sick, and that will save you so much stress because remember, recessions typically do not last longer than 18 months, unless it's 2020, in which case anything goes. Now, if you want to be extra careful though, then I would say to have 100% of the purchase price in what are called liquid assets. And that just means your checking account, your savings accounts, cash, your stocks, but not retirement accounts because those are time locked. And this just gives you more of a buffer. Now, I'm not saying that you should just buy the house outright in cash. That would be really silly in an environment where we have such low interest rates. So it's always better to borrow other people's money when it's cheap and then invest the rest. And if I ever saw that mortgage interest rates were at 4 to 5%, that's when I would prioritize paying down the mortgage, because that's a guaranteed return of 5% on my money. And rule number 3 is the most difficult one to follow, and that is to spend no more than 10% of your gross income, that is money that you make before you pay your taxes, on your mortgage. So this one is very difficult because for the average person, they're going to be spending anywhere between 28 to 36% on their mortgage. So to be at 10% or under means you have to be doing one of 3 things. You're either earning a lot more money than the average person, or number 2, you're buying a lot less house, or number 3, my favorite way of doing this is just to rent out a room either on Airbnb or to a roommate, so you can buy a lot more house than you can afford just by following this guide alone. And I made a video about that as well. Believe it or not though, there's another secret to how much house you should aim for if you can afford it, and that number is $750,000. But that's because of something called the HMID, the Home Mortgage Interest Deduction. And it's a way of allowing us to itemize and deduct the mortgage interest paid on up to $750,000 of principal on our first or second homes. So the way it works is like this. Let's say you bought a house that's worth $750,000 and you locked in the interest rate at 3%. That first year, most of your monthly payment will actually go towards the interest. In fact, your first year, you will spend roughly $22,000 on interest alone, but you get to write off 100% of it. So you would take that $22,000 and multiply it by your tax bracket, which let's say is 35%. So 22,000 times 0.35, and we get $7,700 that we just saved. And that savings continues throughout the life of the loan, and it gets smaller and smaller as we approach the principal, but still, that drops your effective interest rate on the loan from 3% down to 1.9%. In fact, there's a point to be made that if you're gonna buy $1 million house, you should actually wait until the year 2025, because then that $750,000 will be reverted back to $1 million, which means now you can write off even more in taxes. And the more money you make, the higher tax bracket you're in, the more money you get to save. But don't just go out and get yourself a $750,000 mortgage unless it's within your budget and you were going to anyway, because it doesn't make sense to spend $100 just to save $20. Now I realize that buying a house is a very personal and emotional decision. And if it's anything that this pandemic has taught us, it's that maybe we should spend a little bit more money on the place that we're gonna spend a lot of time inside of, living, breathing, working, and smashing the like button. But I'm guilty of this myself, because the house that I'm looking at right now that I really, really love is actually $1.5 million, which is crazy. Does anybody need a $1.5 million house? No, but I want it, and it fills and fits within all of the criteria that I've laid out inside of this video. So when thinking about these rules, think less of them as rules and more like guidelines to help you with your needs as well as your wants. Because if you do follow them, it's going to increase your savings and maximize your retirement, as well as decrease your risk, but it's not going to make you happier. So regardless of whichever path you choose to take, just try not to time the market and think of being lucky, because getting lucky twice is very unlikely. But you don't have to get lucky to get 2 free stocks from Webull by depositing $100 and getting 2 free stocks valued at no less than $8 a piece and up to $1,600 each, depending on what you get. You can also get a free stock from Robinhood using my links down below, or just don't use my links, just go get some free money. You can also follow me on Instagram. I post from time to time. Join my free Discord group. Send me stuff in my PO box. Love you. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you back here on Monday and Friday, sometimes a Wednesday. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.